The Australian Grand Prix. Cancelled. Again. It's truth. Anyway, that's the Aussie audience gone. Roll titles. The Australian Grand Prix would have been the opening round of the 2020 season, but it was cancelled at the last minute thanks to the small matter of a pandemic that I'm sure you're all sick of hearing about. I know I'm sick of getting phone calls about having said virus, but things look to be going back to normal for 2021, but the race was postponed until later in the season rather than flat out cancelled. And now it's flat out cancelled. Again. I'll also add now that the MotoGP race at Phillip Island that was scheduled for later in the year has also been cancelled because of similar issues with logistics and stuff that I will talk about now. But why was it postponed the first time? Australia was doing so well keeping it contained, I hear you ask. And that appears to be the case, checking up on the old statistics. But it was apparently down to the 14-day quarantine on arrival for foreign visitors that messed about with F1's logistics, and putting so many people in hotels for 14 days plus the time needed to be there for the Grand Prix just wasn't cost effective for Formula 1. It has to be said that in the week following the original set date for the Australian Grand Prix, cases of Coffee Boy went up, necessitating another snap lockdown in Australia. And it wasn't just Formula 1 that was affected. You may have seen the news on Twitter or other motorsport sites about how the V8 supercar teams based in Victoria, the state where Melbourne lies, had to pack up all of their stuff and make a dash to the border with New South Wales, due to a last-minute decision by the Victorian Premier to close the border. So the 5 Victorian teams in Kelly Racing, Walkinshaw Andretti United, Erebus, Tickford and Team 18 all managed to make it to the border before the midnight deadline, loading camper vans and car transporters with food, supplies, blankets, the works. They all arrived at Sydney Motorsport Park in a line, while the Kelly team used the family farm as a makeshift base first, and then headed to Eastern Creek, given the Kellys are from New South Wales. The decision to do this allowed the 2020 V8 supercar season to continue. Now, almost a year to the day after Rubber Duck and his mates in the Chartreuse microbus had their little convoy, the Australian government has enacted new protocols for tackling the Coffee Boy outbreak by limiting foreign travellers, and still mandating the 14-day quarantine, and while Victoria is almost completely free of locally transmitted cases, the government isn't risking it, especially considering the low vaccination numbers in Australia. Whether that's because the Australian government couldn't or didn't, I'm not sure. Or maybe it is a good idea to get your jab. I'm not saying you have to, you have a choice in the matter. You can choose how you say I'll get it. That's a joke, by the way. If you don't want it, don't have it, I really don't care. Cases have increased in Australia, but in Australia 35 cases seems to be far too many. Meanwhile, in the UK... Yeah, I'll stop before this becomes a Jonathan Pye sketch. The Guardian reported that F1 had asked the Victorian government for a fly-in, fly-out arrangement with strict biosecurity precautions for everybody involved, as the preceding Brazilian Grand Prix date would mean that doing the 14-day quarantine on arrival in Australia would be impossible given the quick turnaround between the Brazilian and Australian Grand Prix. But since that would give 1,600 people an exception, for want of a better phrase, the government said no. So this means that F1 has to fill a hole in the schedule. Stefano Domenicali is adamant that Formula 1 will get its 23-race season, and the cancellation has allowed fans to have their say on Twitter and other social media, which is something I've been trying to avoid recently. I haven't been doing the race reviews because, let's be honest, F1 fans are really starting to get on my man tits. Bring back Mugello, bring back the Nürburgring, bring back Hockenheim! Which presents a slight problem. The cancelled race in Australia was in November. And if you want to hold a race at the Nürburgring in November, go right ahead. It's bad enough holding the BTCC finale at Brands Hatch in October. You'll need to also factor in the teams will have to go from Brazil to Germany/Italy to Saudi Arabia to Abu Dhabi. And there's already enough fallout with the Saudi Grand Prix as it is. I'll stop now before this becomes a Jonathan Pye sketch. Going from Brazil to Europe to the Middle East, it's just not well, it is plausible, but it's a bit of a detour, isn't it? Put simply, it's due to a small issue with the Earth's rotation around the Sun. In November, Europe is colder. The Southern Hemisphere in November, it's warmer. This is why with the longer seasons we see today, the Southern Hemisphere and Middle Eastern close to the equator races typically go at the end. Bahrain excluded, of course, because that's a night race in March where it's typically a tiny bit cooler. And yes, Japan used to be right at the end of the season back in the 90s, but this was when seasons ended in mid-October, as opposed to late November, early December. I also reckon there's a large chunk of my audience that doesn't remember the Australian Grand Prix being at the end of the season either. So to streamline that end of season run of races, there aren't that many options. There's not really many Class 1 circuits in the Southern Hemisphere or close to the equator. So what can they do? Well, they either host a second race in Brazil like they did with Austria, Britain and Bahrain last season, or revisit Bahrain as the Sakhir Grand Prix, or add another race to Abu Dhabi, and I'm pretty sure nobody wants that. It's not like F1 has had to restructure the calendar already this season. The Canadian Grand Prix, which is one of my favourites of the year, was cancelled due to the pandemic, and the Singapore Grand Prix was dumped because Mercedes cars don't work on the pandemic. The former was replaced by a return to Istanbul, one of the best modern tracks in the world. And personally, a second race at Interlagos would be pretty awesome. It's a good track. I like it. Not in an LMP3 though, it's not fun in a sim racing environment, hitting a GT3 and going down the pit straight on your roof. The guy I hit is now the Zancho race engineer. At least we got data for that. But anyway, rambling over. I'm now going to hand things over to you, the viewers. What are your thoughts on the cancellation of the Australian Grand Prix and, for that matter, the Australian MotoGP GP Grand Prix thing? Are you a Bruce or Sheila that was hoping to go? Or aren't you bothered because it's Australia and the racing's always crap there? Leave all your thoughts in the conversation box under this video and get a discussion going. I love these videos. They get engagement, and engagement is good. And while scrolling down, why not like the video so you know that this video has been worth the effort to put in to make it, and if you're not already, why not subscribe with the bell on so you get all the latest. And if you're also wondering, does this dude ever live stream? Yes. Yes, I do. I'm in a BTCC league in R Factor 2 and the season starts very, very soon. Next Wednesday, in fact. The first round at Donington Park, and I'll be streaming all of the carnage. So there's that to look forward to. There is also a big thank you to all of the patrons of Patreon who continue to support the channel, and if you want to join them or join in the Discord chat, I'll leave links in the description box for you. So until next time, I've been Aidan Millward, have a great day wherever you live in the world, and I'll see you all again very, very soon for another video. So until then, goodbye.